Good evening, everyone. My name's Chris and I buy records. It's been a while since I've done one of these. In my last video, which I believe was in November time, it was around the release of the Beatles Now and Then, and I was quite harsh on that single. I've had time to revise any opinions that I may have in that video, but I'm not going to. I double down. That song is lousy. But you know who is really good at pop music? Taylor Swift. So Taylor Swift is someone who everyone has heard of, and I'm sure that many people will be rolling their eyes about me being a 42-year-old man talking about the validity of Taylor Swift, and it's probably going to back that up with a load of chat about, mixolydian modes and 5/4 time signatures in certain tracks. So I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that because I don't see the point of making apologies for pop music. Pop music is, in spite of whatever we like, pop music is the cornerstone of what makes music vital, and it's the cornerstone of what makes music viable. And I think that that's, a valid point into talking about music as a business model. We need music that sells in order to generate new music. Taylor Swift is currently releasing music through the Republic label. I cannot remember which major label backs Public. I have a feeling it's Universal, simply because Universal back everything, right? It's either Universal, Warner or Sony. I'm going to say Universal. If I'm wrong, fine. I have heard it said that the pressings of Taylor Swift albums basically prop up pressing plants, quite literally. Without Taylor Swift releasing product, there might not be enough business for pressing plants to move forward in that. And I think that that's a double-edged sword in its own right. We've all experienced the delays of smaller labels putting out records because the pressing plants are jammed up with people like Taylor Swift, Adele when Adele releases, Billie Eilish, Ed Sheeran, people like that. But it is a necessary part of that whole process. But I'm not here to talk about the industry of record pressings. There are people who are far more versed and far more knowledgeable about that side of things. And neither is this going to be an apology for pop music. It's not. So my journey with Taylor Swift started with the Folklore and to a lesser extent Evermore albums. So Folklore released, written and recorded, released throughout the kind of pandemic, referred to quite often as a pandemic albums. Her pandemic albums. This is when kind of Taylor Swift became acceptable for white guys of a certain age, me, to sort of get into her music slightly. She started writing and recording with people like Bon Iver and predominantly Aaron Dessner from The National. Now, I'm not a fan of The National. I bought a National album a few years ago, and I found it to be the musical equivalent of watching paint dry. It was horrendous. It was boring. It was just nothing there that interests me. So actually the draw of those albums for me was the stories and the performances that Taylor Swift herself was doing. I liked the concept of it. I liked the fact that it was an album about fictionalised characters that were... it reminded me in a lot of senses of kind of mid-70s Bruce Springsteen. There was a lot of that kind of storytelling. And Bruce Springsteen, as he says in one of his recent documentaries, when I can't remember what it's called, but he's on stage and he's doing some songs, he's talking about them. But the man's a fraud. He openly discusses this. He talks about the struggle of the working man, but he acknowledges, he says, I've never worked a day in my life. So, whereas I think that is true with this album. I think that there's a lot of kind of storytelling. There is some autobiography there, but I like that there's stories and there's themes, and there's themes that run throughout the record. I'm particularly touched by, and I'm really bad at song titles, so I acknowledge that. There is a song where she compares her grandfather's experience in the Second World War with frontline healthcare workers during the pandemic, and I think that is just a really good positive message, especially for people in work-based industries like mine. That's really, really good. There's good melody, harmony, all of that kind of stuff. Really good. The follow-up album, which we also bought, I say we because my wife is predominantly the Taylor Swift fan. Again, not quite as cohesive as the Folklore album, but again, similar kind of feel. There's a kind of a folkiness to it. There's a kind of woodlandy kind of gentleness to it. However, what I want to talk about more than those is a kind of acceptance into the more just straight up pop music. And it took me a while to get into that. So the key thing here is that, as I said, my wife's a huge fan, went to the cinema to see the film of the Eras tour, which then came to streaming. We bought it. It then came to Disney Plus. We watched it. So I've seen it twice. It is without doubt one of the most impressive kind of live shows that I've seen. Now, I don't want to get into the value and validity of concert shows. For example, does it compare to Talking Heads Stop Making Sense or later David Byrne's American Utopia on Broadway? No, they're not even comparable. They're not going for the same thing. With those two films involving David Byrne, they are more sort of performance pieces. They're more about telling having a narrative throughout, whereas I think that the Eras tour, although it has elements of that, is very much about a celebration of her music and a kind of gift to her fans. However, what strikes me is the relationship, the symbiosis that Taylor Swift has with her audience is something that is exciting. Even for someone like me who does not really buy into all of that because it's not for me. But there's nothing wrong with acknowledging that the feelings that you would have being a 15-year-old going to see Taylor Swift in concert is going to be a musical revelation unlike I have ever had. But I can't understate that. There is a profundity to it that I went to see bands that I was into. I went to the Nebworth concert when Oasis played Nebworth, 125,000 people. It was unheard of at that time for an indie band to be playing that kind of show. And I saw it and I was completely wrapped up in it, don't get me wrong. But Oasis didn't speak out to me in a kind of way that would have resonated with my thoughts and feelings as a 15-year-old in the way that Taylor Swift songs do for that particular audience. And that to me is the remarkable thing. And the great thing about music is that music has an ability to speak out to people in ways that other mediums simply don't. There is something about the lyricism and then the melodic structure and everything like that that manages to get to the heart of the emotion of what she is singing about. And that is a real gift. It's something that probably happens in all kinds of pop music in loads and loads of different ways that I simply haven't connected with. However, I do make a connection with Taylor and I can't explain why. I really can't. Then over the past kind of few weeks, I kind of got into the Lover album and then 1989. Which again, I listened to 1989, the Taylor's version of that, which I'll go on to later, in the car on day of release, and I didn't like it, and that's because listening to the music in the car is not for me. To me, you miss 60% of what's actually there. There's road noise, there's concentration on driving, there's all those sorts of things. It's not for me, but listening to it at home on the big speakers, it was a fantastic experience. There was kind of a load of they're produced really, really well. They're considered. There's lots of kind of interesting little embellishments there. Even things like "Shake It Off," which we all know, in the version that the remix has or the re-recording has that was released last year. There's like little brass stabs, which reminds me very much of the kind of early 80s Brazilian boogie scene with Lincoln Olivetti. If you listen to Marcos Valle's self-titled album from 1983, it has those sorts of things on. I don't know if Taylor is influenced by that. I don't know, probably not. But that's what I hear, and it's all nice to make those sort of musical connections. They're good albums. They're legitimately, I'm not going to try and apologise for them. In fact, I have discovered a new record shop. So I have started going to Just Dropped in Coventry, which is part of the relatively new, it's probably not new, it's probably been there for 20 years, but the Fargo development. Really, really good music shop, really great selection of stuff there. I went there last week and I bought, 1989, I bought Crescent by John Coltrane and I bought Expensive Shit by Fela Kuti. And I took it to the counter, and believe it or not, it was 1989 that we sort of spoke about. They commented on the eclecticism of what I was buying, and I made it clear that I said that I didn't want to make any apologies for me not buying 1989. I'm not going to say it's for my wife or my daughter or anything like that. It was literally, it was for me because it's good pop music. And the guy behind the counter actually said, I think that's his best one. And yes, you're right. She is like a force for good. I've posted on my Instagram Taylor Swift albums, and that's the kind of the comments that I'm getting on those aren't this kind of, what are you listening to that for? It is that kind of, she is a force for good. She might not be my kind of thing, but it's a force for good. I got a really nice comment from someone who said that their daughter is kind of that peak age of listening to Taylor Swift, like a sort of a young or mid teenager. And she wanted the records on vinyl. She has started a record collection based on Taylor Swift. What a fantastic thing that is. We can't undervalue that. Records aren't just about buying, and I'm gonna sort of, target myself here, but record buying or record collecting isn't just about buying reissues of jazz albums. It can't be. There must be a sense of moving forward with these things. Now, there are practices I don't particularly like. I'm not a fan of the swathe of releases that come out and the kind of collectible Pokemon type practice of just releasing very many colour variants. I think fine, have collectibles. I think that people connect with that. However, records are 35 to 40 quid. That's a huge amount of money to sort of lay out on something, especially when you can sort of have that for free on Spotify. I'm not entirely sure who is buying every variant of those records. I'm not sure what kind of sense that makes. I think I'm all about accessibility. I don't even mind too much about records being the price they are, because that's economics. But the pressure I think that people might feel to kind of collect them all is a little bit troubling. But on the flip side of that, one thing I do want to talk about is I want to talk about the business decisions that Taylor Swift has made into re-recording those albums. So the story goes that she was really, really hard done by in previous deals. I mean, one thing to remember is that Taylor Swift has been recording albums for, I believe it's 16, 17 years. It's quite a long period of time, and especially when she is quite young. I mean, she's in her mid-30s. So she got into some bad deals. And what she's done, rather than do what Prince did of refusing to release under a name and then going by a symbol and then deliberately recording duff material, or doing what George Michael did in the late 1980s, early 1990s, where he just refused to put records out, is that she's taken the time to re-record all of her albums and then re-release them in the so-called Taylor's version guise, which I think is a really, really elegant, classy solution to do that. The older albums, they're still available. They are also significantly cheaper at cost, especially on vinyl, to buy those. However, if you really want to support the artist, and I kind of think that people who are buying LPs at the kind of price we're talking about, that is a primary kind of thing, is to support the artist. You can do that, and you can do it in a way that doesn't support the practices of shady deals and cutting out of licensing rights and all those sorts of things that she is subjected to. And I just think that's a really, really classy thing to do. And I genuinely mean that. I think that the record industry is besieged with bad practices, that it's a really, really shady industry when you actually break it down. It is. It's a job that you are signed up to do, and you have to guarantee that you will make money for them. You are locked into it for years at a time. If it was an office job, if it was a job in a factory, if it was a retail job, it would be ludicrous. It would not. They would close those organisations down. However, the music industry gets away with it. The music industry, very much an industry. So yeah, so that's my kind of experiences with Taylor Swift. I think she's good. I think that she's worthy. And you know what? I had last week on Sunday, which is my sort of predominant record listening day. I started off with 1989 and then moved on to I can't remember what I listened to now. I think I moved on to Fela Kuti. I moved on to some jazz. And you know what? It enriched those experiences. Not because it was a relief to get away from the pop or anything like that, but it kind of just demonstrated that we need to have variety in order to appreciate all the music that we have on offer. There is more music out in the world right now than I will ever have a chance to listen to. More good music, more music that is essential, more music that will enhance my life than I will ever get around to. So therefore, there is space for variety in there. So yeah, a few words about Taylor Swift. Not all about pop though, just a quick addition if you like. This arrived today. I'm very, very excited by this. This is Bernard Purdie's Purdy Good, released on Craft, All Analog, Kevin Gray, all of those sorts of boring shit. But this is an album I've actually been after for ages. Bernard Purdie, who is probably the most recorded musician ever. It's like a cross between him, Ron Carter, Carol Kay, some other people perhaps. But Bernard Purdie, it's also got a cover of James Brown's Cold Sweat, so that can't be bad, right? So yeah, so I hope everyone's having a good day. Enjoy your music, whatever you want to listen to, and I'll see you on the next one.